Lorenzo Moretti was a man who could order a hit on arrival without blinking, but he was terrified of one thing: the silence in his daughter's bedroom. He thought he had secured his empire. He thought his fiancée was the perfect mother figure for his sick child. But paranoia is a mob boss's best friend. When the doctors couldn't explain why his daughter was getting worse, Lorenzo did the only thing he knew how to do. He initiated surveillance. He hid 3 high-definition cameras in the walls of the nursery. He expected to catch a lazy nurse, or perhaps a thief. He never expected to see the quiet, invisible maid doing something that would force him to his knees, not to beg for mercy, but to offer a diamond ring. This is the story of how a hidden camera revealed a monster, discovered an angel, and changed the Chicago underworld forever. In the criminal underbelly of Chicago, names have weight. You had the low-level street runners, the capos, and then sitting on a throne of blood and concrete, you had Lorenzo Moretti. At 34, Lorenzo was the don of the Moretti crime family. He was a man sculpted from cold marble, handsome in a terrifying way, with eyes the color of burnt espresso and a reputation for absolute brutality. But inside the sprawling, gated estate in Lake Forest, Lorenzo wasn't a don. He was a frantic, grieving father. His wife Maria had died 3 years ago in a car bombing meant for him. She had left him with Sophia, a delicate porcelain doll of a child who was now 6 years old. Sophia suffered from a severe, non-specific autoimmune disorder that left her weak, mute, and constantly bedridden. "She's not eating again, Lorenzo," Vanessa said, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder as she poured herself a glass of Pinot Grigio. Lorenzo tightened his grip on the edge of the mahogany desk in his study. Vanessa Ricci was his fiancée. It wasn't a love match, it was a strategic alliance. Vanessa was the daughter of the Ricci family, a rival faction. Marrying her meant peace. It meant no more car bombs. "What do you mean she's not eating?" Lorenzo growled, his voice vibrating with exhaustion. "We have 3 private chefs. Make her eat." "I tried, darling." Vanessa sighed, walking over to massage his tense shoulders. "But the child is difficult. She just stares at the wall. The doctors said her condition affects her mood. Maybe it's just time to accept that she's fading." Lorenzo stood up so abruptly, his chair crashed backward. "She is not fading. She is a Moretti. We survive." But he didn't feel like a survivor. He felt helpless. Sophia was pale thin and had stopped speaking entirely 6 months ago. The best specialists in the country were baffled. They prescribed rest and nutrition, but she was wasting away. That afternoon, the house manager, a stern man named Marcus, knocked on the door. "Boss, we're short-staffed again." "The night nurse quit. Said the atmosphere in the house is too heavy." "Hire another one," Lorenzo said, rubbing his temples. "And we need a new maid for the 2nd floor. The dust is aggravating Sophia's lungs." "I have a girl waiting in the kitchen," Marcus said. "Name is Elena. No criminal record. Desperate for cash. Her mother is in a care home with dementia. She'll keep her head down and her mouth shut. Send her up. If she looks me in the eye, fire her. I don't want friends. I want the floor scrubbed." 10 minutes later, Elena walked in. Elena Rossi was 24, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. She looked tired. Life had clearly beaten her down, but there was a spark of defiance in her green eyes that she tried to hide. She walked into the office and kept her gaze fixed on the Persian rug. "Name?" Lorenzo asked, not looking up from his paperwork. "Elena, sir." "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir." Does that scare you? Elena paused. She needed this job. Her mother's care home fees were 3 months overdue. Poverty scares me more than you do, Mr. Moretti. Lorenzo stopped writing. He looked up. It was the first time in months someone had spoken to him without trembling. He analyzed her face plain, no makeup exhaustion etched under her eyes, but a strong jawline. You will clean the 2nd floor, Lorenzo commanded, his voice dropping an octave. You will not speak to my daughter. You will not speak to my fiancée unless spoken to. You are a ghost. If I hear you, you're fired. If I see you stealing, you'll disappear. Understood? Understood. Get out. As Elena left the room, Lorenzo felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. He ignored it. He had bigger problems. A shipment of weapons had been seized at the docks, and his daughter was dying in the next room. What Lorenzo didn't know was that he hadn't just hired a maid. He had hired the only person in the house who actually saw the truth. For the first 2 weeks, Elena was exactly what Lorenzo had ordered, a ghost. She scrubbed the marble floors until her knees bruised. She dusted the intricate chandeliers. She polished the silver until she could see her own tired reflection. But Elena was observant. You don't grow up in the rough neighborhoods of Chicago without learning to read the air in a room. And the air in the Moretti mansion was toxic. The center of the toxicity was the nursery. It was a beautiful room, painted a soft lavender filled with expensive toys that had never been touched. In the center lay Sophia, a tiny lump under a heavy down comforter. Elena was strictly forbidden from interacting with Sophia. That was the job of the nurses, and theoretically, Vanessa. But Elena noticed things. She noticed that when Vanessa entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop. One Tuesday afternoon, Elena was polishing the hallway banister just outside the nursery door. The door was slightly ajar. You distinct little brat, Vanessa's voice hissed from inside. It wasn't the sweet, syrupy voice she used around Lorenzo. It was venomous. Elena froze her rag, hovering over the wood. Lorenzo thinks you're sick. Vanessa continued, her voice low. But you're not sick, are you? You're just a leech. A mute, useless leech, sucking the life out of him. Drink this. There was a sound of a struggle. A whimper. Drink it. If you spit it out again, I'll make sure your father doesn't visit you tonight. I'll tell him you're contagious. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She risked a glance through the crack in the door. Vanessa was forcing a spoon into Sophia's mouth. Sophia was crying silently, tears streaming down her pale cheeks, shaking her head. Vanessa pinched the child's nose to force her to swallow the thick grey liquid. Elena wanted to burst in. She wanted to scream. But she remembered Lorenzo's eyes. If I hear you, you're fired. If she got fired, she couldn't help Sophia. And she couldn't part for her mother. She had to be smart. That evening, Lorenzo came home late. He smelled of cigar smoke and gunpowder. He went straight to the nursery. Elena was in the corner, emptying the trash bin, making herself as small as possible. How is she? Lorenzo asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, his face softening as he looked at his daughter. She's resting, my love, Vanessa cooed, leaning against the doorframe. She had a difficult day, very moody, refused to eat her soup. Sophia looked at her father. Her eyes were wide, screaming for help, but her mouth remained shut. She looked terrified of Vanessa. I don't know what to do, Lorenzo whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's forehead. I would burn the world for her, but I can't fix this. You need to focus on the business, Lorenzo, Vanessa said, placing a hand on his arm. The merger with my father's family is next week. Let me handle Sophia. It's woman's work. Lorenzo sighed and stood up. He kissed Sophia's forehead. "Sleep, tesoro, treasure. Papa loves you." As they left, Elena lingered for a split second. She looked at Sophia. The little girl was trembling. Elena placed a finger to her own lips, signaling shh, and then winked. It was a tiny gesture, but Sophia's eyes locked onto her. The next day, Elena put her plan into action. She waited until Vanessa left for her spa day, and the day nurse was downstairs flirting with the security guards. Elena slipped into the nursery with a bucket and mop. She locked the door. "Hi, Sophia," Elena whispered. Sophia shrank back into the pillows. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Elena reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small, slightly squashed chocolate bar. "I know you're not supposed to have this, but I bet that grey slop tastes like old socks, right?" A tiny, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of Sophia's mouth. Elena didn't force her to talk. She just worked. But as she cleaned, she hummed. She hummed old Italian lullabies that her mother used to sing. "Stella stellina, la notte si avvicina." Sophia's tension began to melt. "My mom is sick too," Elena said softly, scrubbing a spot on the floor. "She forgets who I am sometimes. It hurts. But I know she's still in there, just like I know you're in there." Elena moved closer to the bed. She saw the bruising on Sophia's upper arm, faint yellow and green marks that looked like finger grips. Vanessa's fingerprints. Rage, hot and white, flared in Elena's chest. "Did she do this?" Elena whispered, pointing to the bruise. Sophia's eyes widened. She looked at the door, terrified. "It's okay," Elena said fiercely. "I won't tell, not yet. But I'm going to watch over you, Sophia. I promise. I'm the cleaner. No one looks at the cleaner. I can see everything." For the next week, a pattern emerged. Vanessa would torment the child, pinching her, whispering cruel things, feeding her sedatives disguised as vitamins to keep her docile and weak. And Elena would come in after. She would sneak Sophia real food crackers, fruit juice boxes she smuggled in under her cleaning supplies. She would tell stories. She would sing. Sophia started to get a little color back in her cheeks. But the danger was escalating. One evening, Lorenzo was in his study reviewing the security protocols for the estate. His head of security, a gruff man named Rocco, pointed at a blueprint. "Boss, we have blind spots here in the nursery and the hallway. If a hit man gets in through the balcony..." "Fix it," Lorenzo snapped. "But do it quietly. I don't want Sophia scared by workmen drilling into the walls." "We can use the new pinhole cameras," Rocco suggested. "Tiny, invisible. We can install them behind the molding and in the smoke detectors. Wireless feed straight to your private server. Do it. Tonight, while she sleeps." Lorenzo didn't install the cameras because he suspected abuse. He installed them because he feared kidnappers. He feared his enemies. He had no idea that the enemy was sleeping in his bed. 3 days after the cameras were installed, the incident happened. It was a Tuesday, a stormy Chicago night. Lightning flashed against the windows. Lorenzo was downstairs hosting a dinner for the heads of the 5 families. It was a high-stakes meeting. Tension was razor-sharp. Upstairs, Vanessa was in a foul mood. The dress she wanted to wear didn't fit, and she had taken it out on the staff. Now she was in the nursery. Elena was in the hallway pretending to arrange flowers, her heart pounding. She could hear Vanessa's voice rising. "You spilled it on purpose," Vanessa shrieked. Crash! The sound of glass shattering. Elena abandoned the flowers. She ran to the door. Inside, a glass of water lay shattered on the floor. Sophia was cowering her hands over her head. Vanessa had a riding crop in her hand, a gift Lorenzo had given her for her horses. "You want to act like an animal? I'll treat you like one." Vanessa raised the crop. Lorenzo was downstairs. The guards were outside. Elena didn't think. She didn't care about her job. She didn't care about the mafia. She burst into the room. "Stop!" Elena screamed, throwing herself between the woman and the child. Vanessa froze the crop hovering in the air. She looked at Elena with pure shock, which quickly turned to a sneer. "The maid!" Vanessa laughed, a cold, jagged sound. "You dare interrupt me? Put it down!" Elena said, her voice shaking, but her stance firm. She spread her arms, shielding Sophia. "You stupid girl," Vanessa hissed. "You just signed your death warrant. Do you know who I am? I know you're a bully beating a sick child," Elena spat back. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She lowered the crop, but then she lashed out, not at Sophia, but at Elena. The leather struck Elena across the cheek, cutting the skin. Elena cried out and stumbled back, but she didn't move from her spot in front of Sophia. "Get out!" Vanessa screamed. "You're fired. I'll have Marcus throw you in the street. I'm not leaving her with you," Elena said, blood trickling down her face. Suddenly the door flew open. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was Marcus, the house manager, alerted by the shouting. "What is the meaning of this?" Marcus boomed. "This filth attacked me." Vanessa lied instantly, dropping the crop and clutching her chest, forcing fake tears. "She tried to hurt Sophia. I caught her shaking the child, and when I tried to stop her, she attacked me." Elena gasped. "That's a lie. She was—" "Silence!" Marcus barked. He looked at the shattered glass, the crop on the floor, and Elena's bleeding face. Then he looked at Vanessa, the future Don's wife. In the mafia world, hierarchy is everything. The word of the fiancé outweighs the word of the maid. "Get security," Marcus ordered into his radio. "Escort this girl off the premises and tell the boss we had an intruder." "No, please," Elena pleaded as two large guards grabbed her arms. She looked back at Sophia. "Sophia, tell them." But Sophia was paralyzed with fear. She couldn't speak. She just reached a tiny hand out as they dragged Elena away. Elena was thrown out into the rain, the heavy iron gates slamming shut behind her. She had no coat. She had no money. And she had failed. Inside the house, the dinner party was ending. Lorenzo walked his guests to the door. As the last car pulled away, Marcus approached him, looking pale. "Boss, we had an incident upstairs." Lorenzo's blood went cold. "Sophia." "She's fine. Miss Vanessa is with her. It was the maid. Elena. She went crazy, attacked Miss Vanessa. We threw her out." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "She attacked Vanessa in my daughter's room." "Yes, boss." "Where is she now?" "Gone. We kicked her to the street." Lorenzo nodded slowly. "Good. If she comes back, handle it." He walked up the stairs, exhausted. He wanted to check on Sophia, but the door was locked. Vanessa called out from inside. "She's sleeping, darling. Don't wake her. I'm just cleaning up the mess that crazy girl made." Lorenzo went to his study. He poured a whiskey. He sat in the dark. Something didn't sit right. Elena had seemed steady, tough. Why would she attack Vanessa? He remembered the cameras. He hadn't checked the server yet. It had only been recording for 48 hours. Lorenzo spun his chair around and woke up his computer. He typed in his encrypted password, Alpha Omega 88. The screen flickered to life. A grid of 4 camera angles appeared. "Let's see what really happened." Lorenzo whispered to the empty room. He rewound the footage to 8:00 p.m. He pressed play, and his world shattered. The office was silent, save for the hum of the computer fan and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. Outside, the storm was raging, battering the windows of the Moretti estate. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one made of ice and blood. Lorenzo sat motionless. His eyes were glued to the high-definition monitor. He watched the footage from camera 2 hidden in the smoke detector and camera 3 concealed in the molding. On the screen, he saw Vanessa, the woman he was set to marry in 6 days. The woman who smiled for the paparazzi and organized charity galas. He saw her face twist into a mask of pure malice. He saw the riding crop. Whack! Lorenzo flinched, as if the leather had struck his own skin. On the screen, Sophia didn't even scream anymore. She just curled into a ball, accepting the pain. It was a reaction of a child who had been abused for a long time. Lorenzo felt a nausea so violent, he almost vomited. I did this, he thought. I brought this devil into my house. I left my daughter with her. Then the door on the screen flew open. Elena. The footage was clear. Elena didn't hesitate. She threw herself over Sophia's small body. She took the blow meant for his daughter. Lorenzo watched as Elena stood her ground, blood running down her cheek. He turned up the audio. I'm not leaving her with you. Elena's digital voice rang out in the quiet study. Then Marcus and the guards burst in. Lorenzo watched the framing. He saw Vanessa turn on the waterworks, instantly lying with the ease of a sociopath. He saw his own men. He paid men. He trusted, drag the only innocent person in the room out like a criminal. Lorenzo paused the video. He zoomed in on Elena's face right before she was dragged out. She wasn't looking at the guards. She was looking at Sophia, blowing her a kiss. Lorenzo rewound. He went back further. Days back. He saw Elena sneaking food to Sophia. He saw Elena sitting on the floor, reading books to a girl who refused to speak to anyone else. He heard Elena singing, Stella Stellina. La notte si avvicina. Lorenzo's heart, usually a fortress of steel, cracked. This stranger, this maid he had threatened to fire if she looked him in the eye, had been keeping his daughter alive. She had been the mother Sophia desperately needed, while Lorenzo had been too busy playing gangster to notice. And he had just thrown her into a freezing storm. The rage that followed was quiet. It was the kind of rage that toppled empires. Lorenzo stood up. He picked up the heavy crystal decanter of whiskey and hurled it at the wall. It shattered with a deafening crash, the amber liquid staining the expensive wallpaper. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. His voice was a low, guttural growl. Rocco, get in here, now. 30 seconds later, Rocco entered his hand, hovering near his holster, alerted by the crash. Boss. What's wrong? Is it a hit? Look. Lorenzo pointed at the screen. Rocco stepped forward. He watched the clip of Vanessa beating Sophia. The color drained from the tough security chief's face. Mother of God, Rocco whispered. Boss, We didn't know. Marcus said, Marcus is a fool. Lorenzo snapped, grabbing his shoulder holster and strapping it on over his dress shirt. Where is Vanessa? She's in the master bedroom, getting ready for bed. Lock her in, Lorenzo ordered. Put 2 guards at the door. Disable her phone. If she tries to leave, break her legs, but do not kill her. Not yet. Her death needs to be educational. And Marcus, bring him to the basement. I'll deal with him later. Lorenzo walked to the gun safe hidden behind a painting. He pulled out a black Beretta and checked the chamber. Prepare the SUVs. Lorenzo said, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. We're going hunting. Hunting for who, boss? For the maid, Lorenzo said, grabbing his long cashmere coat. Find Elena. Turn this city upside down. If she has so much as a scratch on her from the cold, I will burn Chicago to the ground. Chicago in November is unforgiving. The wind off the lake cuts like a knife. The rain was freezing as it hit the pavement, turning the streets into slick black mirrors. Elena was walking. She didn't know where. Her uniform was soaked through. The thin fabric offered zero protection against the 35-degree weather. Her cheek, where the riding crop had cut her, was throbbing and swollen. She had no purse, no phone, no coat. Marcus hadn't let her take anything from her locker. She was shivering so violently, her teeth chattered, making it hard to breathe. I failed, she thought, wiping rain and tears from her eyes. Sophia is alone with that monster. She reached a bus stop in a bad part of town, the kind of neighborhood where street lights were broken and police sirens were background noise. She huddled on the bench, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to conserve warmth. Well, look what the rain washed up, a voice sneered. Elena looked up. 3 men emerged from the shadows of an alley. They wore hoodies and smelled of cheap beer and trouble. Please, Elena whispered, her voice hoarse. I have no money. Just leave me alone. You don't got money, but you got a pretty face, one of them said, stepping closer. He flicked a switchblade open. You look like you came from the rich side of town. Made outfit kinky. Elena tried to stand, but her legs were numb. She stumbled. The man grabbed her arm, the same arm the guard had bruised earlier. Let go! She screamed, adrenaline giving her a momentary burst of strength. She kicked him in the shin. You little... The man raised his hand to strike her. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the pain. She prayed it would be quick. Screech. The sound of tires tearing against asphalt pierced the air. Eleanor opened her eyes. A convoy of 3 black armored SUVs had swerved onto the street, blocking the bus stop. The doors flew open before the cars even fully stopped. 6 men in tactical suits poured out, weapons drawn. But it was the man who stepped out of the lead vehicle who made the air stand still. Lorenzo Moretti. He looked like the angel of death. His coat billowed behind him in the wind. He held a gun in one hand, but his eyes weren't on the thugs. They were on her. The 3 street thugs froze. They were low-level criminals, but everyone in Chicago knew the Moretti crest on the license plates. Oh, shh. One of the thugs whispered, dropping his knife. It's the Don. Back away from her, Lorenzo said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice carried the weight of a grave. The men scrambled back, hands in the air. We didn't know we were just... Run, Lorenzo said calmly, before I change my mind. The thugs didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted into the darkness, terrified for their lives. Elena was pressed against the cold metal of the bus shelter, trembling. She saw Lorenzo walking toward her. In her mind, he was the monster. He was the one who hired Vanessa. He was the one whose men had thrown her out. Don't hurt me, she sobbed, sliding down the wall. I didn't touch her. I swear I was trying to protect Sophia. Lorenzo holstered his gun. He stopped 3 feet away from her. He saw the blood on her cheek. He saw her shivering. He saw the terror in her eyes. Terror of him. It broke him. He dropped to his knees on the dirty, wet pavement. A don never kneels, but he knelt now. I know, Lorenzo said, his voice cracking. I know everything, Elena. He took off his heavy coat. Gently, as if she were made of glass, he wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth was instant smelling of expensive cologne and tobacco. I saw the tapes, he whispered, looking into her eyes. I saw what you did. You saved my daughter. Elena blinked, confused, her teeth still chattering. You saw. I saw everything. I am so sorry, Elena. I am so sorry. He reached out a hand. She flinched. He paused, letting her see he wasn't going to strike. Then he gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a raindrop near her wound. You are freezing, he said. Let me take you home, not as a maid, as a guest. Please. Elena looked at him. The terrifying mob boss was gone. In his place was a man with eyes full of regret. Sophia, she asked weakly. She is safe. I have men guarding her door, but she needs you. She won't sleep. Elena nodded. Her strength finally gave out, and she slumped forward. Lorenzo caught her. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly. She felt small and fragile against his chest. To the hospital, Rocco asked, opening the back door of the SUV. No, Lorenzo said, climbing in and settling Elena against him. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him to meet us at the estate. I'm not letting her out of my sight. As the convoy sped back toward the mansion, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. She felt warmth. She felt a strong hand holding hers. Rest now, Lorenzo whispered against her hair. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it on my life. But as they drove back to the safety of the estate, Lorenzo knew the war was just beginning. He had locked up Vanessa Ricci, the daughter of the rival Don. By morning, the Ricci family would come looking for her, and when they found out what Lorenzo planned to do to her, the streets of Chicago would run red with blood. The Moretti estate was no longer a home. It was a fortress. The iron gates were double-locked, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter with canine units. Inside the atmosphere was a mix of tender healing and cold fury. Elena woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. The sheets were silk, the pillows down. For a moment, she panicked, thinking she had overslept for her shift. Then the pain in her cheek throbbed, and the memories flooded back. The storm. The thugs. Lorenzo kneeling in the rain. She sat up. She was wearing a soft, oversized cashmere sweater, Lorenzo's. Her uniform was gone. The door opened, and Dr. Evans, a kind-faced elderly man, stepped in. Easy, Miss Rossi, he said gently. You have a nasty contusion on your cheek and mild hypothermia. You need to rest. Sophia, Elena rasped, swinging her legs off the bed. Where is she? She refused to sleep until you were safe, a deep voice said from the doorway. Lorenzo stood there. He had changed out of his wet clothes into a black dress shirt and dark trousers. He looked tired, but his eyes softened when they landed on her. She's in her room, Lorenzo said. Come, I'll take you. Elena ignored the dizziness and followed him. When they entered the nursery, Sophia was sitting up in bed, staring at the door. Her eyes were red from crying. When she saw Elena, she didn't just smile. She scrambled out of the covers and ran. She collided with Elena's legs, burying her face in Elena's waist, sobbing. Elena fell to her knees, hugging the child tight. I've got at you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Lorenzo watched them, a lump forming in his throat. He had never seen Sophia run like that. He realized with a pang of guilt that Sophia had found her mother figure. It just wasn't the woman he had chosen. "Elena," a tiny, scratchy voice whispered. Lorenzo froze. Elena pulled back, eyes wide. "Did you?" Elena asked. "Elena," Sophia repeated clearer this time. It was the first time she had spoken in 6 months. Lorenzo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Tears pricked his eyes. He walked over and placed a large hand on Sophia's head, and then tentatively placed his other hand on Elena's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered to Elena. "Now stay here. Lock the door from the inside. Rocco is outside. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" Elena asked, sensing the shift in his energy. The father was gone. The Don was back. "To take out the trash," Lorenzo said coldly. He turned and marched down the hallway to the guest wing. 2 guards stood outside a locked door. They stepped aside as Lorenzo approached. He unlocked it and kicked the door open. Vanessa was sitting on the bed, still in her silk robe, looking furious rather than afraid. She stood up as he entered. "Finally," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" "Your guards wouldn't let me leave. I am a Ricci. My father will. Your father is the only reason you are still breathing." Lorenzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He walked over to the TV in the room and plugged in a USB drive. "What is that?" Vanessa asked, faltering slightly. Lorenzo pressed play. The footage of her beating Sophia with the riding crop filled the screen. Vanessa's face went white. She sank back onto the bed. "I can explain," she stammered. "Lorenzo, look. The child. She's broken. She makes you weak. I was trying to toughen her up for us. For our empire." "You tortured a 6-year-old, Lorenzo said, walking toward her. "You poisoned her food. You beat her." "She's a mute cripple." Vanessa screamed, her mask slipping, revealing the ugliness underneath. "She's a burden. You needed a real heir, Lorenzo. I was doing you a favor." Lorenzo stopped inches from her face. The air crackled with violence. "She spoke tonight," Lorenzo said softly. "She said Elena's name." Vanessa scoffed. "The maid." "You're choosing the maid over me, over the Ricci alliance." "I am choosing a queen over a snake," Lorenzo spat. He grabbed Vanessa by the arm, roughly hauling her up. "I'm not going to kill you, Vanessa. That would be too easy. And it would start a war I don't want to fight today." He dragged her out of the room, down the stairs, and to the front door, where Marcus was waiting handcuffed and flanked by guards. "Marcus knew," Lorenzo said to Vanessa. "He took your bribes to look the other way." Lorenzo looked at his former house manager. "You worked for my father for 20 years, Marcus, and you sold my daughter for cash. Boss, please." Marcus wept. "The Riccis, they threatened me." "Get them out of my sight," Lorenzo ordered the guards. "Drive Vanessa to her father's estate. Throw her out at the gate. Give her the USB drive. Tell Giovanni Ricci that if he ever sends anyone near my family again, I will wipe his bloodline from the history books." "And Marcus?" Rocco asked. "Take him to the docks," Lorenzo said, turning his back. "He likes the water. Let him swim." As the cars peeled away, Lorenzo stood on the porch. He knew what he had done. He had just publicly humiliated the daughter of the Ricci crime family. The alliance was dead. The war was coming. 48 hours later, the silence broke. Lorenzo was in the nursery reading a story to Sophia. Elena was sitting in a chair nearby, sewing a button onto Sophia's favorite teddy bear. It was a domestic scene that felt incredibly fragile. "Lorenzo," Elena said softly, She had stopped calling him sir. "It's too quiet. The staff are nervous." "Let them be nervous. It keeps them sharp," Lorenzo said, closing the book. But he felt it, too. The calm before the tsunami. Suddenly, the red emergency lights in the hallway flared. A siren wailed a low mechanical drone that signaled a perimeter breach. Lorenzo was on his feet instantly, his gun drawn. "Get in the closet," he commanded. "The panic room is too far. Into the closet now." Elena grabbed Sophia and ran into the walk-in closet. Lorenzo shoved a heavy dresser in front of the door. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." Boom! The front gates of the estate exploded. Through the window, Lorenzo saw 3 armored trucks smashing through the burning debris of the gate. Men in ski masks poured out, carrying automatic rifles. They weren't sneaking in. This was a siege. "Rocco!" Lorenzo yelled into his radio. "Status? We're overrun." "Boss." "They hit the west wall, too." "It's the Ritchies. They brought a damn army." Lorenzo smashed the window with the butt of his gun and took aim. He fired, taking down 2 men who were sprinting across the lawn. But there were too many. Bullets began to tear into the siding of the house. Glass shattered everywhere. "They're inside," a guard screamed over the radio before the line went dead. Lorenzo cursed. He couldn't hold the hallway alone. He ran back to the closet. "We have to move," he shouted, shoving the dresser aside. Elena was huddled in the corner, shielding Sophia, with her body just like she had done in the video. "Can you shoot?" Lorenzo asked, pulling a spare 9mm from his ankle holster. Elena looked at the gun with wide eyes. I've never held one." "Point and pull. Don't hesitate." He shoved the cold metal into her hand. "We need to get to the garage. The escape tunnel is there." They moved into the hallway. Smoke was filling the air. Downstairs, the sound of gunfire was deafening. They reached the top of the grand staircase. Below the foyer was a war zone. Lorenzo's men were trading fire with the Ricci soldiers. "Go, go, go!" Lorenzo pushed Elena toward the back stairs. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the linen closet. It was a Ricci soldier. He raised his rifle. Lorenzo was too far away. He lunged, but he wouldn't make it in time. Bang! The soldier dropped, clutching his chest. Lorenzo spun around. Elena stood there, the pistol shaking in her hands, smoke drifting from the barrel. She had fired. She had saved him. "Good shot!" Lorenzo breathed, adrenaline surging. He grabbed her hand. "Now run!" They sprinted down the back stairs into the kitchen. It was empty, but the back door was kicked in. "The tunnel entrance is behind the wine rack in the pantry," Lorenzo said. As they crossed the kitchen, the back door swung open again. Don Giovanni Ricci stood there. He was an older man, heavy-set with a face like a bulldog. He was flanked by 4 heavily armed bodyguards. "Lorenzo." Giovanni smiled, his teeth yellow. "You send my daughter back like a used whore, and you think there are no consequences." Lorenzo stepped in front of Elena and Sophia. He was outgunned, 5 against 1. "She tortured my child, Giovanni. You raised a monster." "I raised a queen," Giovanni roared. "And you chose a cleaning lady." He gestured to Elena. "Look at her. Pathetic. She has more honor in her little finger than your whole family," Lorenzo snarled. "Kill him," Giovanni ordered his men. "But keep the girl. I want to teach her a lesson before she dies." The guards raised their weapons. Lorenzo braced himself to be the human shield. He prepared to die. But suddenly a high-pitched sound pierced the air. Whoosh! A drone the size of a dinner plate flew in through the broken kitchen window. It hovered for a split second between Lorenzo and the Ricci men. "What the?" Giovanni started. Flash! The drone detonated a stun grenade. A blinding white light and a deafening bang filled the small room. Lorenzo, anticipating it, because he knew his security protocols, had squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears instantly. He kicked Elena's legs, forcing her down. The Ricci men were blinded, screaming, clutching their eyes. Lorenzo didn't waste the second. Pop! 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 4 shots, 4 guards down. Only Giovanni was left, stumbling, rubbing his eyes, trying to raise his gun. Lorenzo walked over and kicked the gun out of the old man's hand. He grabbed Giovanni by the throat and slammed him against the refrigerator. "My house," Lorenzo whispered into his ear. "My rules." Rocco burst into the kitchen a second later, blood on his forehead, but alive, followed by a squad of reinforcements. "Secure the perimeter," Rocco yelled. "We got the Don." Lorenzo didn't let go of Giovanni's throat. "Call your men off," he hissed, "or I will paint this kitchen with your brains." Giovanni, gasping for air, raised a shaking hand. "Stop! Stop firing!" he wheezed. The gunfire outside died down. Lorenzo looked back. Elena was on the floor, holding Sofia. She looked terrified, but she was alive. He looked back at Giovanni. "The war is over," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly quiet. "You lost, and now you're going to sign over every territory you own to the Moretti family as an apology for waking up my daughter." Lorenzo shoved the old man toward Rocco. "Lock him in the cellar. I'll deal with him after breakfast." He walked over to Elena. He knelt down just like he had in the rain. "Are you okay?" he asked, checking her for wounds. Elena looked at the gun in her hand, then at him. She dropped the weapon and threw her arms around his neck. "I thought we were dead," she sobbed. "Not while I'm breathing," Lorenzo vowed, holding her tight, burying his face in her neck. "Never while I'm breathing." Sofia wiggled between them, grabbing both their hands. In the middle of the smoke, the shattered glass and the bodies of their enemies. They sat there on the kitchen floor. A family forged in fire. But the story wasn't quite over. There was one last question to answer. The proposal. Spring arrived in Chicago, melting the ice and washing away the blood of the Winter War. It had been 6 months since the siege at the Moretti estate. The underworld had changed dramatically. With Giovanni Ricci retired to a maximum security prison cell, courtesy of evidence Lorenzo had anonymously provided to the FBI, the Ricci family had crumbled. Lorenzo Moretti was now the undisputed king of Chicago. But the biggest change wasn't in the streets, it was in the nursery. The nursery was no longer a silent lavender prison. It was a chaotic mess of Lego blocks, art supplies, and laughter. Sofia was unrecognizable. The pale, mute ghost was gone. In her place was a vibrant 7-year-old with rosy cheeks who refused to stop talking. The doctors called it a medical miracle. Lorenzo called it the Elena effect. Elena had stayed, not as a maid, but not quite as a girlfriend either. She was the savior. She lived in the guest suite. She took Sofia to therapy. She cooked dinner because she didn't trust the chefs not to use too much salt. Lorenzo treated her with a terrified reverence. He was a man who knew how to conquer cities, but he had no idea how to court the woman who had saved his soul. He bought her cars she didn't drive. He bought her jewelry she kept in the box. He was waiting for the right moment. That moment was the annual syndicate gala. It was the most important night of the year for the criminal elite. Usually it was a place for backroom deals. Tonight, Lorenzo had a different agenda. "I can't go, Lorenzo," Elena said, standing in the middle of her room, looking at a dress box on the bed. "Look at me. I'm a maid from the South Side. Those people, they'll eat me alive. They know who I was. They'll laugh at you." Lorenzo walked into the room. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than the house Elena grew up in. He looked devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were warm. "Let them laugh," Lorenzo said, "and I will cut out their tongues." "Lorenzo," Elena scolded, though a smile tugged at her lips. "Elena." He stepped closer, taking her hands. They were rough from years of scrubbing floors, but to him they were perfect. "You are not a maid. You are the only person in this house who has never lied to me. You are the only person who loved Sophia when she had nothing to offer. You are royalty. Now put on the dress." Elena opened the box. It was a gown of deep emerald green silk, the color of her eyes. It was modest, elegant, and regal. When she walked down the grand staircase an hour later, the entire staff stopped working to stare. Rocco, standing by the door, actually took off his sunglasses. "Wow," Sophia whispered. She was dressed in a matching miniature green dress, holding Lorenzo's hand. "You look like a Disney princess, Elena." Lorenzo didn't speak. He walked up the stairs to meet her halfway. He offered his arm. "Ready to conquer Rome?" he asked. "Chicago." She corrected, her heart pounding. "Same thing." The gala was held in the crystal ballroom of the Drake Hotel. When Lorenzo Moretti entered the room, went silent. The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to them. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that her? The help I heard she shot a Ricci soldier. I heard she saved the Don's life." Vanessa Ricci was not there. She was living in exile in Europe, cut off from the family fortune, a pariah. Lorenzo led Elena to the center of the room. He didn't hide her in a corner. He marched her right to the head table. Then he took the microphone. "Distinguished guests," Lorenzo's voice boomed. "You all know me as a man of business, a man of war." The crowd chuckled nervously. "But a man is nothing without his legacy." Lorenzo continued, looking down at Sophia, who was waving at a waiter. "This winter my legacy was almost destroyed, not by a bullet, but by betrayal inside my own walls." The room went deadly quiet. "I was blind," Lorenzo admitted, his voice raw. "I looked for loyalty in bloodlines and last names. I looked for a mother for my child in status and wealth. I was wrong." He turned to Elena. She was shaking slightly. "I found honor in a bucket of soapy water," Lorenzo said, and a few gasps were heard. "I found courage in a woman who had every reason to hate me, but chose to love my daughter instead. Elena Rossi didn't just clean my house. She cleaned my life." Lorenzo reached into his tuxedo jacket. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. The Dawn of Chicago dropped to one knee. It wasn't the wet pavement this time. It was a marble floor under crystal chandeliers. But the look in his eyes was the same absolute, terrifying vulnerability. "Elena," he said, holding up a ring. It wasn't a gaudy rock. It was a rare pink diamond surrounded by emeralds. "You saved Sophia. You saved me. I don't want you to work for me. I don't want you to be my guest. I want you to be my equal. I want you to be my wife." He took a breath. "I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to scrub another floor unless you really want to. Will you marry us?" He didn't say me. He said us. He gestured to Sophia. Sophia ran forward, beaming. "Say yes! Say yes!" Elena looked at the man who had once terrified her. She looked at the little girl who was now her whole world. She looked at the crowd of gangsters and politicians who were watching with bated breath. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the poor maid. She was the woman who had walked through fire and come out holding the hand of the devil himself. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. Then louder. "Yes!" The room erupted. Even the toughest capos were clapping. Rocco was wiping a tear from his eye in the corner. Lorenzo slipped the ring on her finger. He stood up and kissed her a kiss that sealed the new era of the Moretti family. As they pulled away, Sophia tugged on Lorenzo's jacket. "Papa." "Yes, tesoro." "Does this mean Eleanor is the boss of you now?" Lorenzo looked at his new fiancée, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Yes, Sophia." The Don smiled. "She has been the boss since the day she walked in." What a roller coaster of emotions. From the terrifying silence of a sick child's room to the explosive gunfight in the kitchen, and finally that beautiful proposal in the ballroom. This story reminds us that true nobility isn't found in titles, money, or last names. Vanessa had all the status in the world, but her heart was rotten. Elena had nothing, no money, no power, no coat in the freezing rain, but she possessed the kind of bravery that can bring a mafia don to his knees. Lorenzo learned the hard way that you can install all the cameras you want, but the most important things are seen with the heart. He found his queen not in a palace, but scrubbing his floors. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel and tells me you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. And I want to know your opinion. Do you think Lorenzo should have forgiven Marcus, the house manager? Or did he get what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.